because we're all new, lots of us don't know each other. So if we could introduce ourselves, tell us where you're from, and answer the question of how do you relax? And we do have a talking piece. So you can do, I'll pick up the piece, you answer the question, and then you put the piece back so people know that you're finished. That would be awesome. And then please write it on a sticky note as well. So piece in the middle, anybody can start.
I'm Sheldon Schwetik. I am calling from very rainy, thundery Kalamazoo, Michigan right now. And I just got back from 3 days at the cottage up on Lake Michigan in Manistee, Michigan. And that's one of the ways that I relax.
I'm Shelley Nessman, and I am coming from the traditional territory of the Musqueam people. Settlers call it Richmond, British Columbia in Canada. And one of the ways that I relax, especially lately this summer, I've really reignited my love of reading for pleasure. So I'm always open to hear about books you're reading. So keep that in mind.
I'll pick up the piece. I'm Michaela Kennedy. I'm from the Fraser Coast, Queensland, Butchula and Gubbi Gubbi land. And I like to relax by walking my dog on the beach.
I'm Bob Sattler from Denver, Colorado. And I like to relax by getting out into the garden and digging in the dirt.
Hey, I'm Cherie Henley. I'm from the Good Life Builders. I'm based in Canberra, which is Ngunnawal land, and I relax by doing arts and crafts.
Hi, I'm Allison, and my sticky note keeps disappearing, and it's very windy. My husband just chased our patio umbrella across the yard, so I'm a little distracted and not relaxed.
Told you it was stormy.
Oh, I'll pick up the piece. I'm sorry to hear that. It's a windy day. I'm Mary Beth Lepkowski. I'm joining from Solvang, California, which is on the Central Coast. And I relax by walking outdoors and listening to music.
I'm Catherine Titus. Hello, everyone, and greetings from beautiful Spokane, Washington. And I'm on the ancestral lands of the interior Salish tribe of people. And I, as a visual description, I am a middle-aged white woman, very pale, wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing glasses. I have long red hair that's up in a bun. And in my background is a brown wall with a orange and yellow painting of flowers. And I relax. I really do relax. I'm not sure how. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, which can be relaxing.
Yes. Hi, I'm Julie Carrington from Australia, Gubbi Gubbi land. I relax by, I have to leave the house if I have to relax. Otherwise I get caught in things. So walking the dog, I love it. Going to the garden, getting my hands in the dirt, a bit like you, Bob, I think it was Bob. Yeah. And yeah, look, just sitting in nature, you know, sometimes the bird life or the wildlife catches me, and that's a really good, you know, sort of instant relaxer. So yeah, but yeah, I can tend to be a little bit of a workaholic, so I have to really practice my relaxing skills. Peace back.
My name is Amy Shawcross. I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. And I relax by doing yoga, as well as I also like walking in nature to kind of center me.
Hello, I'm Ron. I'm from recently moved back to Maitland in Australia, and I relax by walking in nature, walking with my dog.
I'm Meredith Bayliss. I live on Bundjalung country, which is a beautiful part of northern New South Wales in Australia. And I relax by doing yoga lattes, which is a combination of yoga and Pilates, and by being out in nature.
Thanks, guys. I think that's everyone, right? Everyone had a go? I'm going to hand over to Sheldon, and Sheldon is going to tell us a bit of his perspective on, has person-centeredness become systematized and lost its magic? Thanks, Sheldon. Over to you.
Thanks, Michaela. Well, I imagine we wouldn't necessarily be having this conversation if some of us didn't think that it's lost its magic. So my history with person-centered planning was that I kind of learned at the feet of Jack Pierpoint, Marcia Forrest, and John O'Brien, attending Toronto Summer Institutes for decades at this point. And really at that time was working for a young man on the spectrum, my friend Matt, who utilized the circle, and futures planning was really the beginning of my introduction to the use of what maths and path are, and particularly path math. Matt was graduating from high school and trying to figure out how to do all the things that people who are trying to transition out of high school and have some complex needs to figure out how to live on their own. So we did a bunch of planning with a group of people, and that really kind of set the stage for me and my understanding about what person-centered planning really is and what it looks like. That was about at probably in the very beginning stages of both MAPS and PATH that had been developed by Jack, John, and Marcia at that point in time. And certainly people have continued to build on that. If we jump ahead to today, which is almost 30 years later, so I'm aging myself a little bit by saying that, is that, and I'm working here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, currently for an ARC called the ARC Community Advocates, which only does advocacy for people who experience intellectual and developmental disabilities. And there is a bit of a resurgence happening here in Michigan around this idea of what does good person-centered planning look like. So I feel like there's a glimmer of hope, but unfortunately, when I first came here, which was almost 20 years ago, and about 10 years ago was working in the system and applied for a job to be a program supervisor at a group home that I'd been working at. And in the interview was asked what I thought about person-centered planning and the process that they were utilizing at that point in Michigan. And I looked at one of the interviewers and just said, you mean the bastardized version of person-centered planning, which is really just an individualized plan of service written with PCP at the top of it? And basically got a shocked look at his face, and he said, tell me what you really feel, how you really feel about it. I said, I haven't even started yet, so let's not go there. But to know that person-centered planning is more than a bunch of checkboxes, that it is about relationship and connection and people having an opportunity to understand what's going on for people and being able to support them. So currently in Michigan, there is a little group of us, Allison, who's on the phone, and a number of others have been utilizing practices of person-centered planning for a really long time and are trying to figure out how not to screw it up again is really why we're meeting on the regular. There's about a half a dozen of us. And trying to go back to doing that work on an individualized basis. Like, what does it really look like to help bring a plan together, to help a person figure out what they want to do? And so we're currently working with a friend of ours who doesn't really have a lot of family and who really wants to actually go back to school to get her degree in political science. Someone who has an intellectual impairment, but certainly graduated from high school, and there's no reason why without some support she couldn't graduate with a diploma in political science. And since we have been encouraging that and planning around that, she's already decided she doesn't just want a degree, but she wants a doctorate in political science. And this is a young woman who is really an amazing advocate and probably one of the most politically connected advocates in Michigan right now. And yet here she is without a family and without just regular day-to-day supports in some ways that will help to support her in her journey to figuring that out. And I believe without many of us making some decisions around how to be intentional around supporting people again and being a part of those circles. Many of the people on her circle right now are related to her professionally, and in her professional capacity as a self-advocate. But how do we grow that circle so that there are people in the community who continue to support her? But without coming together and thinking about some of those hard and difficult questions with her to try and problem solve some of that, I don't know that we're going to get anywhere. So for me, it has lost its magic, and yet there's still opportunity for that to change. It's not that there aren't little pockets of really good person-centered planning going on around the world. Shelley, who's also on the call, and myself run a little consulting company called In the Company of Others, and we did a whole bunch of training in British Columbia, one of the places where they're really not struggling, but really trying to figure out what it looks like to do good person-centered planning. And we spent the last few years some time in a lot of different places across British Columbia talking about good person-centered processes and what those look like, and want to continue to encourage really the world to figure out that this is the way to go, and that it is about connection, and it is about one person at a time. And we often lose sight of that when we become part of big systems, that it's still at the end of the day, one person at a time and trying to figure it out. So that's my story.
Thanks, Sheldon. Awesome. And look, you know, I've known Sheldon and Shelley for some time now. Privileged to know them and privileged to hear your story. Thanks, Sheldon. It's awesome. You've just got such a wealth of knowledge and years of experience. And, you know, over the years, I've heard Sheldon, you know, relate how person-centered practice is to beekeeping, and but all of those things, you know, they just really come back to the core, don't they? That core of relationship and connections. And
somebody in the chat, Michaela, asked what I meant by systematized, and I think that that's a really good question. Here in the United States, particularly in Michigan, when they were looking at quote unquote reinvigorating and utilizing what were definitely more person-centered practices and more person-centered thinking in the work that they were doing, at the end of the day, like I said, an individualized plan of service got systematized into what they now called a person-centered plan. And I think that's pretty common around even the world around what does good person-centered planning look like, is that the system picked that up, whatever system you might be working within, and saying, oh, this looks really good. And then losing sight of the fact that it is a one person at a time, a group of people around that person to help figure out what a good life might mean. And that could be a small group or a large group, but it's not just a group of professionals sitting around and figuring out how to help people access services. It's about helping people figure out how to have a good life at the end of the day. And without somebody holding that intention, then we lose sight of that. It's really easy to lose sight of it, and people do just become a bunch of check boxes, and they're stuck in the life that they've been allowed by the system because that's what's available as far as money or resources are concerned. So, and I want to work really hard and continue to work really hard to figure out what does that look like in a non-systematized way, and how do we bring that to the system so that it can be utilized in ways that are going to be helpful to people.
cool, thanks, Sheldon. So what we might do now is if everyone pops into element 5, the World Cafe setup. For World Cafe, for those who haven't done it before, this is really about using a bit of a practice and a system to get the most out of conversations. The people who designed it, Juanita Brown, and I can never remember the other guy's name. Anyone else got that? Yeah, David Isaacs. And really, you know, I think it all came from a time that they hosted a conversation and a gathering of people at their place, and there were so many people that they struggled having a conversation. So the idea is, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but, you know, you get together with a small group of friends, you know, there's only like 4, 5, maybe 6 of you max, you know, and, you know, maybe that's over a cup of tea or a beverage of some sort, but you seem to be able to solve the world's problems, you know, just in this small group of people. So the idea is that we have a small group of people, we chat, and some good, strong questions, which we think we have here today. And then what we also do after that is we share, what are those gems? What are those golden gems that came out of those conversations? And then we move you around to mix it up with some other people, and we have more conversations. And through that way, we can get deeper. We can, look for, themes and patterns and link things together from what other people say. So if you, the World Cafe guidelines, it's all about, having fun. We ask you to please, on your sticky notes, play and doodle and draw. There is a drawing function on the sticky note as well. Please contribute your thinking, speak with your mind and your heart. Tell us what you really think in this group. Slow down to have time to think and reflect. Please remember that silence is a part of the conversation. There may be a silent moment or two, and people think during those silent moments. You don't need to fill every space. So listen to understand rather than listening to add your piece. So try and get in there a little bit deeper, and listening together for those patterns and insights and deeper connections. So like I said, we'll have one round of 15 minutes to talk on this wicked question. We will ask that in each group that you have a report back. So we'll ask for each group to have someone to report back for your gold pieces. So towards the end of that, we'll send you a reminder now from your conversations, what's those gold pieces you'd like to share with the bigger group. So don't worry too much about that, and don't worry about too much of setting this up beforehand. We'll send you reminders through your conversations. Just get in there, have a conversation, and we'll send you reminders about the pieces of gold and who's going to report it back to the big group. So is that cool to go? All right. So remember, your question is, has person-centeredness become systematized and lost its magic? So that's your wicked question for today, and you'll do 2 rounds of conversation. So we'll start with the first conversation for 15 minutes. Whenever Mary Beth is ready with your breakout rooms, you'll be sent to a breakout room. Welcome back. Sorry about the short timing on the pieces of gold. Did you get that? Did you get your pieces of gold or something that you'd like to report back? Or let's start off with breakout room 1. If someone would like to tell us your gold there.
So I was in a room with Bob and Julie, and we harvested the magic is in the community and in discovering the gifts of the person that they can use to lead the life they want to lead. Our second gold nugget was, if we are asking the people what they want, we need to act on what we are hearing and find the right people in the system to act on that information. And our third piece, we need to be teaching those reviewing the plans what is included in a person-centered plan and how to get that approved. And we couldn't resist by throwing an extra one in there, by doing the development with the people, not for the people, to capture those magic moments.
Thanks, Meredith. I got 2 of the sticky notes up there, but I think the last one I dropped a couple of words on the end there. I couldn't type fast enough. Could I trouble you to pop them into on the board for us? Thank you. I just did that and I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's why I haven't been seeing any.
It's all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about our
Alrighty.
next room? Next breakout room.
Yeah, props to group 1 for doing 2 things at once. We didn't do that. But we think the answer to the question from our perspective, has person-centered planning lost its magic, is yes and no. And so we talked a lot about there are pockets of amazing things happening everywhere, but that maybe part of it is that we're not very good at curating the stories to create like what would feel more like the story. And so people are doing wonderful work all over the place, but it's maybe we're not necessarily hearing about it. And then we also talked about there are good people in systems. Sheldon, I was just saying, I thought you were so too generous about systems and the well-meaningness. I think there are great people in systems, but something just often goes off the rails around co-opting things. And anyway, so we were saying that things like parents and families' experiences are so key to this, because that Cherie was talking about her own experience, and just that hurt, the change from one way of doing things to the next was so integral to her son's life. And that's the kind of thing I think that people need to hear, or we think that people need to hear. So that's our goal for today, for this one anyway.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelley. Thank you, room 2. Room 3. And I apologize about my comments about sticky notes. I opened up one of the links and look at all these sticky notes.
Well, we didn't have a chance to do that either. I think there's already some themes showing up, but one of the things we were really struck by is that often we recognize that the language has also been systematized, like what the system means by person-centered isn't necessarily true person-centeredness. So we talked a little bit about that, and the fact that in being systematized, much of the creativity has been lost because you're working within the system and the structures of the system. Recognize that often community isn't involved, and all of us believe in the system, and all of us, at least I'm imagining all of us on this call, would believe that community is an integral part of building a good life, and what good person-centeredness looks like. And the system doesn't work very hard to bring community into those conversations. It takes some pretty significant effort on people at the center and the people close to them to do that. Recognizing that the keys are really connection and relationships. And those, again, aren't often honored in the work that we do with systems. And then Bron had a really great point of that often even working in systems, she's working in Australia with a family and managed to get service provision and community members involved in a particular plan, but now they're working and moving into the school system and trying to help somebody get into school and placed in school, and that becomes another whole system unto itself, which doesn't even have any idea about what person-centeredness is. And so sometimes while we work in our own silo around disability, we forget that there are these other silos that don't even have a clue about what we're talking about. And so we're now back at the beginning of educating people about what good person-centeredness looks like. And for me at the ARC here in Kalamazoo, that is a big part of what we do. We do a lot of educational advocacy because it's so legislated, but it also begs the conversation of often people come to us looking for help in education, and nobody's actually addressing all the other needs that they might have with respect to having their son or daughter have a good life.
Awesome, thank you. I just wanted to ask, is there anyone else that wants to make a comment at this point? Because what we're going to do is shuffle you around so you get to talk to some other people with the same question again. So if does anyone want to make a comment that maybe, you know, is striking you at the moment, or that hasn't been covered by what has been said, that you want to add to this moment? Okay, cool. So we're going to send you out to the second round of this conversation. It's the same question again. Please, if you didn't get your sticky notes on for the gold of the last round, please do so. And then you've got another 15 minutes on the same question, and you can harvest your notes as you go, or we'll give you some prompts as well. And promise, Mary Beth and I will not get into too much chatting and give you prompts in good timing. All right, enjoy your second round of conversation. Hello, welcome back. Alrighty, let's do the same thing. So room 1, let's hear your goal, please.
Okay, so our nuggets are, how do we stop systems taking away people's rights and humanness? The importance of families and storytelling and keeping that at the fore of everything we do without diminishing the systems needed to help get the needs met. And how do we keep showing that in the work we do is important? It's not prescriptive, it's individualized, but it needs to be supported by those systems.
So, yeah, we talked a lot, Bron. I think I really got, I was having the same struggle in the schools for, a participant, a gorgeous young boy that I'm working with. And I think for us, that's really where, we rolled with that a lot. It's like, the system falls down, they're given a big pot of money, the school's given a big pot of money, but they don't focus that money on the child. So, that's sort of really, and we talked a lot about pro bono. If you really want person-centeredness to happen, then we're going in there pro bono. Pretty much everything that I do is pro bono, because if you're passionate about it and it really is person-centered, then there's no fun, there's no, they're not going to pay it, or that's just my interesting perspective being a baby, in the field. But yeah, it's the languaging. So yeah, we talked about too, going back into, like early, we call it early intervention, but, like, let's start from the beginning, like go in there from, these young ages and try and, bring some real, person-centeredness in there. That's sort of really where the gap is. Let's know, like these children, these people have had, these things going on for 20 years, and then they're all of a sudden find they're stuck, and then we're coming in putting all these band-aids and trying to then bring it back and get some focus on it, whereas if we started it from the beginning. So I suppose for me it's keeping that passion alive for those of us that are person-centered. That's really, if we're passionate, we go in, small baby steps will make an impact. I don't know how to change it from the big way unless, in a big way. But yeah, peace back. I could ramble, but I'll stop.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Room 3.
So we had some great conversations, really thinking about resources, and really thinking about that we need to keep the conversations positive and not really demoralize the person or the family by only offering what is currently offered. And we need to look at resources differently. So we need to find people who are willing to take on the challenge and perhaps change the nature of the conversation and take out a couple of key words. Let's not talk about we need staff or we need funding. Let's talk about what other resources are available. And when we have some of those conversations, we need to realize it's an evolving mindset and culture. So I was telling folks, my new favorite word is yet. So when I hear we can't do that yet. We're not there yet. So how do we change the nature of the conversation to get people thinking differently about resources? Sandy, Bron, anything else that I?
Cool. Again, is there anything else that anybody else would like to mention before we check out today?
I think one other thing that came up, and I know that Meredith mentioned it, but this idea that the system really doesn't honor citizenship, that people often become the cog in the wheel or the machine of the system, that they're just one part. And they rotate a lot of other parts, but they don't necessarily get honored for what they bring to the table, that they're just a part of that. They're just a cog in the wheel, as opposed to a citizen with a true sense of belonging and connection and need beyond what the system can also offer. I think for me, that's the other piece around systems and person-centeredness, is that the system focuses only on what it can fulfill at the end of the day, and what they're actually legislated to fulfill at the end of the day. And that at the end of the day is not a good life for people.
Yeah.
And there was just at the end of our conversation just now, we talked about how like people who ask for help are often expected to just be grateful for whatever they can get, rather than actually, you know, it is okay for you to ask for what you need and we'll find a way to provide that, rather than this is all we can give. Just be grateful and that's all, you know, don't ask for anything else. Yeah.
Mm.
You know, something that's coming up for me is, Sheldon, you mentioned the word legislative. And, you know, if we really dig deep, why does the system exist? Why is the system so systematized? Why does the system exclude community? Why is the system self-serving? At least here in the US, I think we would find a lot of answers in legislation. And legislation and rules are not always designed with the person or the community's interests at heart. It's about money, often.
I think their goal is, the goal of systems is often to keep the person safe and occupied and happy, rather than living a good life, you know. And of course you don't have to do person-centered planning to help them stay safe and occupied and happy. They aim low.
Yeah, I agree.
That a good life, of course, if you were living a good life where you were thriving and flourishing, you would be safe and happy. Also, you wouldn't be living a thriving life if you weren't safe. You know, it's this bizarre, it's all, I think part of it too is in the US where the legislature makes decisions based on budgets. The reality is that there are all kinds of people advocating for the money to be spent different ways, whether or not they work in the system. And so, you know, the motive sometimes is for people to keep their jobs. And that's what, not people with disabilities. And that's what gets funded, you know, so staying optimistic is challenging, but key.
I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet recently, just around, it seems like our systems are designed to catch the 3%ers of the cheats. And therefore it makes it much more difficult for everybody else to weave through that system. But if we actually designed the systems to trust and honor people, know what's better for themselves, and put more money into catching the cheats, then wouldn't that be better for everybody?
It was the thing that I would add, Michaela, is that often legislation legislates to the lowest common denominator. It doesn't raise people up. It actually is who, like, who has cheated before, and how do we address that in the process? How do we legislate for all the things that could go wrong, as opposed to trusting people and thinking about, like, that 3% is probably pretty small in the scheme of things, and yet everything is guided by the 3% as opposed to the 97% who are utilizing it and trying to actually create something that not only gives them the access to the system and services, but gives them access to a life beyond that.
Yep. Look, thank you so much for your passionate conversations. It's really been great. We do need to move to a checkout.
And Michaela, as we are checking out, there were some gold nuggets that were spoken there. If you can capture those and harvest them here, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. Please do. We will be sharing these harvests. We will be sharing the videos. You'll get them emailed to you in the first instance, but then eventually we will have them on a website as well. I also just want to remind you that there is another conversation in another 12 hours time on the other end of this day. And then for you US people, I think it's tomorrow. So please check the Facebook page, check, and so we'll run this question 3 times, 3 different time zones. And then next week, we have another question, and I'll just get that for you so you can do a little bit of pre-thinking on it. So next week's question is, how do we shift injustices and design for quality of life? So it would be really nice that, you know, we keep on building and talking, and who knows where we'll get to at the end of this 6 weeks, but we'll see. We'll keep on sharing that with you. So for today, please check out with do you have a place that is special or sacred? Peace back.
I'll pick up because I've got to rush off to another meeting. Where I am now is very sacred and special to me. The land that we live on, most of my family live here. A few of my family have passed here, so the land where I tread, the land where I walk is very sacred to me. Peace back. See you all next week.
My home where I am right now is one of them, but really for me, big water is a pretty sacred place for me, and it doesn't matter where that is, but the ocean or a Great Lake works just fine. But big water, not a little inland lake somewhere. It's got to be big water. Was sitting on the shore this weekend, and it sounded like the ocean. So that tells you how big Lake Michigan is. So thank you.
I'll pick up. Oh, sorry, Miss.
You go.
So I spent a lot of my childhood in the Australian bush, and it's a very special place to me and makes me feel curious and safe and excited. So that's my special place. Peace back.
Thanks, Meredith. I'll pick up. Yeah, I'm a bit the same with the bush. Always felt at home in the bush. We did a lot of camping when we were kids, and I'm very lucky to be living in a little nature walk that goes down to the beach, and then there's lots of, you know, bush and nature and water, and as long as I'm in nature, I feel special. Peace back.
I'll pick up. Just because, yeah, mine would be the same as Meredith's and Michaela, the Australian bush, which I haven't explored as much in these, you know, recent stay-at-home orders, lockdown days. But I can't wait until I can once again. And yeah, such a beautiful place and brings up so much creativity and inspiration. Yeah, beautiful place. Peace back.
I'll pick up. I think for me, almost anywhere in nature. I live in rural, you know, situation, but I think, you know, of my parents' 80-acre farm, where you can have, you know, commune with, you know, walk in your bare feet and hear the chipmunks and the squirrels and the birds and the, you know, wild turkeys and all that sort of thing. But I also think with Sheldon, you know, the shores of Lake Superior and Lake Huron and, you know, larger bodies of water, and just hearing that. I spent a month of my vacation just you know, touring the Great Lakes in Ontario, and spending most of my time on the shores of one of the Great Lakes. Yeah. Peace out.
The ocean is certainly my sacred space. I've lived on both coasts of the US and spent a lot of time in Hawaii. And the ocean is so alive, and it has moods, and it's constantly changing in color and form. So it just really, there's just a very, very strong connection. Water must be my spirit guide. Peace up. Back.
I'll pick up. For me, it's the mountains, getting out into the mountains and nature and being close to the sky and the stars and hiking and vast views. It's just amazing.
I agree. I'm a mountain girl myself, just the views and looking out at the world below you just gives you perspective, and that despite what's going on in my head, any anxieties or whatever, the world is just, it's going to be okay. You know, the world keeps ticking, and it just gives me perspective. So I love mountains too.
The introverted part of me loves the rainforest and the river, but the extroverted part of me finds sacredness in just being with all of you, being in presence with you. And so for me today, that is sacred. Thank you.
I put on my sticky note that being on my back patio, which is one of the few times that I get to spend with my older cat who won't be around the younger cats. And also any place that I am with my parents is my favorite thing. It's my favorite place.
Awesome. That's everybody.
That was so poetic. We all linked together. That's beautiful.
Amazing how much is like nature and people. Goes to show what we really need in life. Huh? Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope we see you next week for another round of good in-depth conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a fabulous day or a fabulous evening, wherever you are. Thanks, Bron.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.